The desert was wide and endless, sand stretching in every direction. The wind carried dust across broken towers and fallen machines. It was a dead place, a battlefield from long ago. The sun burned above, making the air heavy and dry. A lone human soldier walked slowly, his boots sinking into the sand. His armor was scratched, his water almost gone, and his stomach empty. He carried only one thing to eat, a small chocolate bar hidden inside his pocket. The soldier's name was Captain Reed. He had been lost for days, searching for a way back to his unit. Every step was harder than the last. His throat dry, his mind dizzy. He thought he would die here, alone under the strange alien sky. But then, he saw her. At first, he thought it was a shadow or a trick of the sun, a figure sitting on the sand, covered in a loose hooded robe. As he came closer, he saw it was a girl. Her skin was pale with a faint blue glow, her eyes huge and shining like glass. Her hair fell across her face, and she looked thin, weak, and hungry. She looked up at him without fear. There was only silence between them, broken by the wind. She did not move. She only stared at him with those bright eyes. Reed stopped, unsure what to do. He had been told about aliens on this planet. Some were dangerous, others were beggars. But this one looked poor, almost helpless. He felt pity. Her lips were dry, her face tired, and her hands trembled. She looked like she had not eaten for days. Reed reached into his pocket and pulled out the chocolate bar. It was the last one he had, the final piece of Earth's sweetness in this ruined world. He held it out with his gloved hand. The girl's eyes widened as if she had never seen such a thing before. She leaned forward, slowly, as if afraid it might disappear. Her fingers touched the wrapper, cold against his warm glove. She pulled it close, holding it carefully like a treasure. Her lips parted in surprise, her eyes glimmered. She took a small bite, and for the first time, she smiled. It was a soft smile, but it carried warmth and something deeper. Reed felt strange, as if this simple act meant more than he understood. The girl looked at him again, but this time her gaze was different. It was sharper, glowing, almost powerful. Reed blinked, unsure if it was the sun in his eyes or something else. Her hands stopped trembling. Her back straightened. The chocolate seemed to give her strength, but also something hidden. For a moment, Reed thought she looked less like a beggar and more like something important, something waiting to awaken, but he shook the thought away. She was just a poor alien girl, wasn't she? He turned his eyes to the horizon, thinking only of survival. The girl chewed slowly, never looking away from him. Her expression was unreadable now, half gratitude, half mystery. The desert wind grew stronger, carrying strange sounds, metallic echoes from far away, whispers like machines moving under the sand. Reed felt uneasy, his soldier's instincts warning him, but he told himself it was only the desert, nothing more. The girl stood up at last, her robe moved with the wind, her glowing eyes fixed on him. She spoke no words, only watched him. Reed turned and started walking, and to his surprise, she followed, step by step, always a few feet behind him. He did not tell her to leave, and she did not ask. It was as if the chocolate bar had bound them together. Hours passed, the sun fell lower, and the shadows of ruined towers stretched long. Reed stopped at a broken wall to rest. The girl sat close, still silent, still watching. It was strange, almost uncomfortable, yet he could not push her away. Something about her felt important, though he could not explain why. When night came, the stars above burned like cold fire. Ed closed his eyes to sleep, the sand rough beneath him, but the girl did not sleep. She stood under the starlight, her hood falling back, her glowing face turned toward the sky. Her eyes reflected the stars, and in that moment, she did not look poor at all. She looked like a queen hiding in rags. Reed did not see it, but the desert seemed to respond to her presence. Shadows moved, machines far away trembled, as if waiting for her command. The chocolate bar was gone, but its gift remained. The human soldier thought he had saved a poor alien girl, but the truth was far darker. She was not poor, not helpless. She was something else, something greater, and soon the whole world would know. The desert was quiet at dawn, the air still and heavy. Captain Reed woke with sand on his armor and dust in his throat. He rubbed his tired eyes and looked around. The girl was sitting a few steps away, her robe wrapped around her slim frame. Her glowing eyes were open, watching the horizon as if she could see something far away. Reed stood up slowly, his joints stiff. He wanted to keep moving, to find his unit, to find water, to survive. He almost forgot the girl until she stood and followed, silent as a shadow. Reed thought she would leave after the chocolate, but she stayed close. Every time he looked back, her glowing eyes were there, calm, unblinking. Hours passed, the sand burned under the rising sun. The broken towers of old machines stood like giants in the distance. Reed felt weak, every step heavier than the last. But something strange began to happen. When the girl walked near old wreckage, lights flickered, rusty panels hummed, long-dead machines stirred as if they felt her presence. Reed noticed but told himself it was nothing. The desert played tricks, he thought. Still, it happened again and again. A broken drone lit up when she passed, its red eye glowing for a moment before falling dark again. A half-buried turret rotated slightly, then froze. Reed frowned, his soldier's instinct uneasy. The girl never reacted, she only walked as if this was her normal. When the sun reached its highest point, Reed stopped to rest. He sat under the shade of a fallen pillar, his chest rising with tired breaths. The girl sat across from him, her glowing eyes never leaving his face. Finally, he asked, "Why are you following me?" The girl tilted her head but gave no answer. Her silence was sharp, like she knew more than she wanted to say. Reed shook his head, muttering to himself. He thought she might not understand his language, but then she whispered, soft and clear, "Safe." Her voice was delicate, almost musical, yet it carried weight. Reed froze, realizing she could speak. Before he could ask again, the desert wind howled, carrying echoes of movement. Reed's hand went to his weapon, his eyes scanning the horizon. Shapes moved far away, glints of metal catching the sun. He knew the look. Scouts, hunters, machines built to track. His stomach sank, his hands tight around the weapon. He thought they were after him, but when the girl saw them, her glowing eyes widened, and she whispered again, "They come for me." The words hit him like a stone. Reed turned, staring at her in shock. She looked so small, so weak, yet her voice held truth. The hunters were not after a lost soldier. They were after her. Reed felt his pulse race. His training told him to run, to leave her. But something inside him, something stubborn, kept him still. The hunters came closer, moving fast over the dunes. Reed pulled the girl behind the fallen pillar, his weapon ready. He counted the shadows, too many for him alone. His eyes darted to her. "Why? Who are you?" he hissed. The girl's lips pressed tight, her glowing eyes shining brighter. She whispered, "I am not poor, not weak." Reed's heart thumped, the words sinking in. He realized the chocolate bar was not charity. It was a bond, and now he was caught in her secret. The ground began to tremble, softer. First, then stronger. The machines buried in the sand groaned and shifted. Panels lit up with long-dead energy, glowing faintly under the dust. Reed stared in disbelief. The girl stood, lifting her hand slightly, her robe falling back. Her pale blue skin shimmered under the sun. Her glowing eyes reflected the light of ancient machines rising from their graves. The hunters stopped at the sight, their shadows frozen against the dunes. They knew what she was, and fear spread through their lines. Reed gripped his weapon tighter, sweat on his brow. The girl turned her gaze to him, her face calm, almost royal. She whispered, "I hide no more." The machines around them stirred, their eyes glowing red and blue. Metal groaned, sand fell away. Forgotten giants awakening after centuries of silence. Reed's chest tightened, his mind racing. This girl was not what he thought. She was not helpless, not poor. She was something else, something powerful, the last of a bloodline maybe, or a key to something older than the war itself. The hunters began to retreat, their fear greater than their orders. But Reed knew this was only the beginning. The desert was alive, and it was alive because of her. The girl lowered her hand, her glowing eyes softer now. She looked at him as if waiting, testing him. Would he stay or would he abandon her? Reed felt the weight of the choice pressing down. He thought of the chocolate bar, the small act of kindness, and he knew he was bound to her now, whether he liked it or not. The wind howled again, carrying dust and echoes of machines waking from sleep. Reed looked at the horizon, knowing danger would not stop here. The girl stood beside him, small but unshaken. She was the reason the hunters came. She was the reason the machines moved. And Reed realized, with a sinking feeling, that his life was no longer his own. The sun fell lower in the sky, painting the desert gold and red. Captain Reed walked with heavy steps, his eyes scanning the horizon again and again. The alien girl followed close, her glowing eyes calm though. Shadows of danger crept closer every hour. He felt the weight of her silence, the mystery of her presence, and the truth of her whispered words. The hunters were coming, and they were coming for her. Reed stopped on a ridge of sand, his boots sinking deep. He raised his weapon and looked through the cracked sight. Far in the distance, dust clouds rose like storm waves. Shapes of metal and flesh moved within, fast, trained, and merciless. They were not ordinary soldiers. They were trackers, men and machines who never gave up their prey. The girl stood beside him, her robe pulled by the wind. Her eyes glowed brighter now, as if the setting sun only gave her more strength. Reed turned to her, his voice sharp. "Why do they hunt you? What are you really?" She lowered her gaze, silent for a moment. Then, in a voice soft but firm, she answered, "Because I am the last." The word struck Reed like a bullet. The last of what, he thought. Before he could ask, the desert ground shook beneath them. The hunters were closer now, their engines rumbling, their banners dark against the dying light. Reed cursed under his breath, pulling the girl behind a wrecked transport half buried in the sand. The machines moved with precision, scanning, searching. Drones flew overhead, their red eyes glowing as they cut through the air. Reed fired at one, the shot cracking the silence. The drone fell smoking into the sand. But now they knew where he was. The hunters advanced faster, spreading in a wide circle to trap them. The girl placed her hand on the wreck beside them. Old metal groaned. Sparks danced across the surface. Reed pulled back in shock. The wreck shifted. Lights flickered alive for the first time in centuries. A faint hum rose from deep inside the buried machine. Reed's eyes widened. "What are you doing?" Her voice was calm, calling them. The hunters drew closer, their shadows long across the sand. Reed fired again, hitting one of the soldiers. The figure fell with a scream. But there were too many, too fast. The girl stepped forward, her robe falling open to reveal her pale blue skin glowing with faint light. She lifted her hands slowly, and the sand around them began to tremble. From beneath the dunes, ancient machines rose like ghosts, metal shining with strange blue energy. Giant forms pulled themselves free, half broken but still alive. The hunters froze, their lines breaking as fear rippled through them. Reed stared, unable to believe what he saw. This small girl, this so-called beggar, was commanding an army of the dead. Her glowing eyes reflected the machines as they turned toward the hunters. The air filled with the sound of grinding gears, deep metallic roars. The hunters fired, bullets and lasers cutting through the dust, but the machines answered with beams of light, tearing through the sand like fire. The battle had begun. Reed pulled the girl back as explosions shook the ground. She looked at him with calm eyes, her voice steady. "They will not stop. They will keep coming until I am taken or destroyed." Reed's chest tightened. He understood now. He had thought she was helpless, but she was the reason armies marched, the reason blood would spill across this desert. And yet, when she looked at him, there was trust in her gaze, as if she believed he would protect her. The battle raged, smoke and dust covering the sky. Reed fought beside the machines, his rifle burning hot in his hands. He shot down drones, struck enemies who came too close, but his mind raced with questions. Why was she the last? Last of what? A bloodline? A dynasty? A weapon? Every answer brought only more fear. The hunters began to retreat, their leaders shouting orders. They had seen enough. They knew she was alive. And today that was enough. They would return with more, stronger forces. Reed wiped sweat from his brow, his heart pounding. He turned to the girl. "What are you? Tell me the truth." She looked at him, her face calm but her eyes burning like stars. Her voice was almost a whisper. "I am the last heir of this world." Reed froze, his weapon lowering. He looked at her small figure standing in the smoke and fire. An heir, a queen, a survivor of a race thought destroyed. He realized now why the hunters feared her, why the machines obeyed her. She was not just a girl, not just a beggar. She was the key to power older than his own people's arrival on this world. The desert wind blew harder, carrying the smell of smoke and metal. The girl turned her gaze to the horizon where the hunters had fled. Her voice was quiet but heavy with promise. "They will return." Reed swallowed hard, his stomach sinking. He knew she was right. The hunt had only begun, and now he was part of it, bound by one simple act, one last chocolate bar, and there was no turning back. The desert night was cold, the sky filled with silent stars. Captain Reed sat by a small fire made from scraps of broken wood. The flames flickered weakly, pushing back the darkness for only a few steps. The alien girl sat across from him, her glowing eyes bright against the night. Her face was calm, almost too calm for someone who had nearly been captured that day. Reed chewed on dry rations, his stomach empty but his mind even emptier. Questions spun through his head, refusing to let him rest. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and sharp. "You need to tell me the truth." The girl tilted her head, silent. Her long hair caught the firelight, glowing faint blue. Reed's eyes narrowed. I saw what you did. I saw the machines rise for you. That doesn't happen to beggars, doesn't happen to the poor. Who are you really? The girl lowered her gaze, her hands folding in her lap. Her voice came soft, like a song. I am the last daughter of the old rulers. Reed blinked, not sure he had heard right. She continued, her words flowing like water over stone. Long ago, before your kind came, my people ruled this world. The towers, the machines, the cities, all answered to us. Reed leaned forward, the fire crackling between them. She lifted her glowing eyes to meet his. But war came, the sky burned, my family was hunted, our bloodline broken. Her voice grew quiet, heavy with memory. I was hidden away, told to wait, told to survive, and so I did, until you found me. Reed felt the weight of her words. He thought of the chocolate bar, of how small and fragile she had seemed. But now, with the fire painting shadows on her face, she did not look fragile at all. She looked royal, even in her torn robe. He rubbed his temples, muttering, "So you're some kind of princess." The girl tilted her head again. "Princess is your word. We were not like your kings. But yes, I am the last heir." Silence fell between them, broken only by the wind. Reed felt his chest tighten. This was bigger than anything he had wanted. He only wanted to survive, to find his unit, to leave this desert. But now he was sitting across from the last heir of an alien world, and the hunters, the machines, the armies. They would not stop until she was theirs. The girl spoke again, her voice steady. "The machines you saw, they are part of us. They were built to serve my people. They remember my blood. They remember me." Reed's eyes widened. He understood now. The wrecks in the desert, the towers, the weapons, all of it could wake if she willed it. She was not just a survivor. She was the key to an entire planet's sleeping power. Reed leaned back, staring at the stars. His voice came bitter. "So that's why they want you, not because you're weak, but because you're dangerous." The girl looked at him with calm eyes, her voice soft but firm. "I am not dangerous, unless they make me so. I only want to live." For the first time, Reed saw something human in her gaze. Not just royalty, not just power, but loneliness. She had carried this secret alone, hidden for years, waiting for someone to find her, and he had given her chocolate, a gift so small yet powerful enough to make her follow him. The fire burned lower, the desert darker. Reed shifted uncomfortably, his soldier's mind fighting with his heart. Finally he asked, "Why me? Why follow me?" The girl's lips curved into the faintest smile. "Because you gave when you had nothing, others take, but you gave." Her words struck deep. Reed looked away, staring into the dark. He remembered his hunger, his thirst, and still he had given away his last food. Maybe it was foolish, maybe it was kind, maybe both. But now that choice bound him to her. The night passed slowly, filled with whispers of movement far beyond the firelight. Hunters were still searching, their shadows crawling across the dunes. The girl closed her eyes and placed her hand on the sand. The ground hummed faintly, like a heartbeat. Reed felt it through his boots, through the fire, through his bones. The desert itself seemed to breathe with her. She whispered, "This world is not dead, it only sleeps, and I can wake it." Reed stared, his stomach turning. He imagined towers rising, machines marching, an army at her command. If she chose war, she could burn the sky again. If she chose peace, she could rebuild what was lost. He realized then that her choice, not his, would decide the future of this planet. But one thing was clear, the hunters would return. They knew she lived, they knew her secret, and they would bring more. Reed clenched his fists, his soldier's instinct telling him to leave, to run. But the girl's glowing eyes held him still. She was young, alone, powerful, and yet she looked at him with trust. And Reed knew he could not abandon her. Not now, not ever. The fire burned to embers, the cold air cut through the silence. Reed pulled his cloak tighter and leaned back against the sand. The girl remained awake, her eyes on the stars. She looked less like a child, less like a beggar. She looked like destiny wrapped in rags, waiting for the moment to rise. And Reed, weary soldier, broken man, realized with heavy breath that he had stepped into a story much greater than his own. He had shared his last chocolate bar, and in return, he had gained a secret that could shake the universe. The alien girl was no longer just a stranger in the desert. She was the last heir, the hidden power, the key to everything. And soon, the world would come for her. The sun rose over the desert once again, a pale orange light spreading across the endless dunes. Captain Reed walked in silence, his rifle strapped across his back, his boots heavy in the sand. Beside him, the alien girl moved gracefully. her robe brushing against the sand as if she belonged to it. Her glowing eyes stayed on the horizon, calm but sharp, as if she was always waiting for danger. Reed's thoughts were heavy, his mind replaying her words from the night before. She was the last heir, the bloodline of rulers long destroyed, the key to waking the machines buried beneath the sand, and now he was the one walking beside her, bound by a simple act of kindness. He wished he had never given her that chocolate bar, and yet deep inside, he knew he could not regret it. The silence broke when he noticed shadows moving on the ridge. Figures appeared, armored and armed, their weapons gleaming under the morning sun. Reed pulled the girl behind a broken wall, his hand tightening on his weapon. The strangers came closer, moving with purpose, not hunters this time, but men, human men. Reed's chest tightened. These were not his unit, but mercenaries, survivors who had sold their loyalty to the highest bidder. One of them stepped forward, a tall man with scarred armor and a cruel smile. "Captain Reed," the man called out, his voice rough. "You've been hard to find." Reed narrowed his eyes, raising his rifle. "What do you want?" The man chuckled, his eyes flicking toward the girl. "Not you, soldier. Her." Reed's stomach dropped. He knew at once these men had come with an offer. The tall man spread his arms. "Hand her over, and you walk free. Food, water, a ship off this cursed rock, everything you want." Reed felt the girl's eyes on him, calm but questioning. His mouth went dry. The offer was tempting. His survival had always been his goal, and now here it was, within reach. If he just let go of her. The mercenary's smile widened. "Don't be a fool. She's nothing but trouble. She'll bring death to you, to everyone. Give her to us, and live." Reed clenched his jaw, his heart pounding. He looked at the girl, her pale face glowing faintly, her expression unreadable. She said nothing. She only waited, as if testing him. He thought of his hunger, his thirst, his unit that might never find him. And then he thought of the chocolate bar, the way her eyes had lit up, the trust that had grown from that single moment. The silence stretched until Reed finally lowered his rifle, not to surrender her, but to ready himself. His voice came cold, steady. "If you want her, you'll have to come through me." The mercenary's smile faded, his eyes hardening. "So be it," he muttered, and raised his weapon. Gunfire split the silence, bullets striking the wall around them. Reed pulled the girl down, returning fire with sharp, practiced bursts. The battle was fierce, dust and smoke filling the air. The girl pressed her hands against the sand, her glowing eyes flaring brighter. The ground trembled, and from beneath the dunes, small machines stirred, broken drones waking to her call. They rose with sparks and fire, their weapons still functional, answering to her blood. The mercenaries cursed. Some fell back as the old machines attacked. Others pressed forward, firing wildly, desperate to take her. Reed moved like a man possessed, covering her with precise shots. He fought not for survival, but for choice, the choice he had already made. He would not betray her, not for water, not for food, not for freedom. When the smoke cleared, the mercenaries were gone, their bodies scattered, the survivors fleeing into the dunes. Reed dropped to his knees, his breath heavy, sweat dripping down his face. The girl stood beside him, her eyes glowing softer now. She looked down at him, her voice quiet but firm. "You chose." Reed looked up, exhausted. "I didn't have a choice." She shook her head slowly, her glowing eyes full of something deeper. "There is always a choice." The words sank into him like stone. He realized then that he could have left her, could have betrayed her, and yet he had not. Not because of duty, not because of logic, but because of something inside him he could not explain. Trust, maybe, or honor, or something smaller, but stronger. The fire of one simple act, the sharing of a chocolate bar, still burned between them. The girl sat beside him, her robe falling across the sand. She whispered softly, almost to herself, "Long ago, my people said that when a human shares food, it is not just a gift, it is a bond." Reed raised his brows. "Your people knew humans?" She nodded, her voice carrying secrets. "Before the war, before the fall, yes, we knew, and we remembered." The desert wind blew hard, carrying away the smoke and the smell of blood. Reed stared at the horizon, his heart heavy but steady. The hunters would return, the mercenaries would return, and worse would follow. But he had made his choice, and there was no turning back. The girl looked at him with quiet trust, and he knew now what he was fighting for. Not survival, no. Freedom, but something greater. The desert stretched before them, endless and cruel, but together they walked, a weary soldier and the last heir of a broken world, bound by choice, by trust, and by a single piece of chocolate that had changed everything. The desert was no longer silent. Smoke rose from the dunes where mercenaries had fallen, and the air smelled of metal and fire. Captain Reed walked slowly, his body aching, his mind heavy. Beside him, the alien girl moved without fear, her glowing eyes fixed on the horizon. The battle had ended, but he knew it was only a beginning. They stopped at the ruins of a great tower, its shadow stretching long across the sand. Reed leaned against the broken wall, wiping sweat from his brow. He looked at the girl, frustration in his voice. "You said they will keep coming. How many?" The girl's eyes glowed faintly, her voice soft but steady. "All of them, until I am taken, or until I stand." Her words chilled him, not because of fear, but because she spoke them without hesitation. As night fell again, Reed saw movement far across the dunes. Dozens of lights, maybe hundreds, flickering like fireflies in the dark. Engines roared, weapons glowed, armies marched. Reed's chest tightened. He whispered, "They're bringing everything." The girl placed her hand on the sand, her face calm. "Then so will I." The ground trembled, soft at first, then stronger. The ruins around them hummed with hidden life. Old towers flickered with blue light. Machines buried beneath the desert stirred. Reed watched in awe as giant forms rose from the sand, metal bodies shining in the moonlight. Ancient war machines, forgotten by time, awakened to her call. The girl stood tall now, her robe falling back, her pale skin glowing like crystal under the stars. Her voice rang clear, not loud but commanding. "Rise, guardians of my people, rise and remember." The machines obeyed, their eyes glowing bright, their massive frames shaking the earth with every step. Reed gripped his rifle, his heart racing. He realized he was no longer just a soldier. He was standing at the side of a queen commanding an army from the grave. The enemy came fast, their weapons cutting through the night. Lasers burned, rockets exploded, the desert turned into fire and thunder. Reed dropped behind cover, firing back at shadows racing over the sand. The girl did not hide. She walked forward, her eyes blazing. The machines shielded her, their weapons answering the enemy with devastating power. The desert lit up, a war of fire against fire, light against light. Reed's ears rang with the sound of battle. He fired at drones, struck soldiers who pushed too close. But even as the machines crushed their enemies, he knew this war would not end here. The hunters and mercenaries would not stop, and someone greater stood behind them. And then, in the chaos, a new shadow appeared. From the horizon came a figure taller than the rest, an armored warlord, his body fused with alien metal, his voice echoing like thunder. "So it is true!" the warlord shouted, his gaze fixed on the girl. "The last heir lives." The girl's glowing eyes narrowed, her voice calm. "And you fear me?" The warlord laughed, the sound cruel and sharp. "Fear you? No, child. I will use you. You will kneel, or you will burn." Reed raised his rifle, firing at the warlord, but the bullets sparked harmlessly against heavy armor. The warlord strode forward, his weapon glowing with dark energy. The girl lifted her hand, machines answering her call, firing beams of blue light, but the warlord blocked them with shields of black steel. Reed's stomach dropped. This was no ordinary enemy. This was the true leader, the one they had all been waiting for. The battle raged louder. The sky itself seemed to burn. Reed fought with everything he had, but the warlord's army was endless. The girl closed her eyes for a moment, her voice a whisper carried Bishesuri. "The wind. Remember, Reed, you chose me. Now fight beside me." Her eyes flared brighter than ever, the sand around her swirling like a storm. The machines answered with roars of power, their weapons glowing hotter. The ground cracked, towers rose higher. The war of the past had returned to life. Reed pressed his back against the ruins, his rifle nearly empty. He looked at her, standing in the fire and light, and for a moment he saw not a child, not a beggar, but a queen. Her face was fierce, her voice unshaken. Every machine bent to her will, every weapon answered her blood. And Reed realized that this battle was not about survival anymore. It was about destiny, hers, and now his. The warlord stepped closer, his massive blade glowing red. The girl lifted her hands, light spilling from her skin. The machine surged forward to block the blow, metal against metal, fire against fire. The desert shook with the clash, thunder rolling across the empty land. Reed stumbled, his heart pounding, his voice breaking. "How can we stop him?" The girl turned her glowing eyes to him, her words heavy as stone. "We cannot stop him yet, but we can survive, and survival is the first step to victory." The war continued through the night, explosions lighting the sky like false suns. Reed fought until his arms shook, until his voice was hoarse with shouts. The girl never stopped, never faltered, her glowing eyes burning like stars. The machines kept rising, as if the desert itself had chosen her. And though the enemy was strong, though the warlord stood like a mountain, she did not bow. At dawn, the battlefield was covered in smoke and silence. The warlord had not fallen, but he had retreated, his army broken for now. The girl stood in the ruins, her face calm, her eyes glowing softer. Reed looked at her, his chest heavy, his voice rough. "You woke a war." She looked back at him, her voice quiet but certain. "No, Reed, the war was always here. I only reminded it to breathe." The dawn light spread across the desert, soft and pale. The battlefield was silent now, covered with smoke, broken weapons, and shattered machines. Captain Reed stood among the ruins, his rifle hanging heavy in his hands. His body ached, his lungs burned, but his eyes stayed on the girl. She stood at the center of the wreckage, her glowing eyes calm, her robe torn, her pale skin shining faintly in the morning light. The warlord had retreated, his army shattered for now. But Reed knew it was not victory, only a pause. More would come, stronger and greater, until the girl was theirs or destroyed. She knew it too, and yet she stood tall, unbroken. Reed walked to her slowly, his voice rough. "You need to tell me everything, no more secrets." The girl turned her gaze to him, her eyes glowing brighter than the rising sun. "I am the last heir," she said softly. "The last blood of rulers who once shaped this world. The last voice that the machines obey." Her words were steady, not proud, not fearful, only true. Reed felt the weight of them, heavier than any weapon he had carried. He rubbed his face, his voice bitter. "So what now? Do you use this power? Do you fight them forever?" The girl lowered her eyes, her voice quiet. "That is the choice I must make." They walked through the ruins, the sand crunching under their boots. Everywhere they looked, old machines lay half-buried, waiting. If she chose, she could wake them all. An army greater than anything Reed had seen. She could crush her enemies, burn their worlds, claim her throne, or she could remain silent, let the machines sleep and try to build peace. The choice was hers, but Reed knew it would shape the future of two species. The desert wind howled, carrying the echo of battles past. The girl stopped at the base of a broken tower, her hands resting on the stone. She looked at Reed, her voice soft. "What would you do?" Reed froze. The question struck him harder than any bullet. He thought of his unit, of the war that had already cost too much. He thought of her, the girl who had followed him only because he gave her chocolate. He thought of kindness, of survival, of power. And finally he spoke, his voice low. "If you fight with anger, you'll become like them. But if you fight for more than yourself, maybe there is hope." The girl closed her eyes, the wind lifting her hair. Her glowing skin brightened, and the ground hummed beneath her feet. She raised her hand and the machine stirred again. Reed's chest tightened. He feared she had chosen war. But then, she lowered her hand, and the machines fell silent once more. Her eyes opened, soft but shining. "I choose life," she whispered, "not revenge." Reed let out a breath he had not known he was holding. The weight on his chest eased, but he knew the danger was not gone. The hunters would return. The warlord would return. The choice would be tested again and again. But in that moment she had chosen peace, and that was enough. The girl stepped closer, her eyes fixed on him. "You gave me chocolate, a gift when you had nothing. You showed me kindness when the world gave me none. That is why I choose this path." Reed blinked, his throat tight. He had never thought such a small act could matter, but to her, it was everything. It had reminded her of trust, of hope, of what it meant to live for more than power. Together, they left the battlefield, walking into the endless desert. The sun climbed higher, burning the sand with heat. Reed's steps were heavy, but his heart felt lighter than it had in years. He was no longer just a lost soldier, no longer just a man trying to survive. He was part of something greater, something that had begun with a single piece of chocolate. Far behind them, the machines lay quiet, their glowing eyes fading to silence. But they were not gone, only waiting. Waiting for her voice, waiting for her choice. She was their queen, their heir, their weapon. But she had chosen not to be a weapon, not yet, not today. As night came once more, they stopped at the top of a high dune. The stars burned above them, sharp and endless. Reed lay back, staring at them, his voice quiet. "Do you think peace is possible?" The girl sat beside him, her glowing eyes reflecting the starlight. Her answer was soft but strong. "Peace is never given, it is made." Reed turned his head to her, her small figure silhouetted against the sky. She looked fragile again, like the girl he had first seen sitting in the sand. But he knew better now. She was not poor, not helpless. She was the last heir, the key to a world's future. And his fate was tied to hers, bound forever by that single act of kindness. The desert wind whispered around them, carrying both warning and promise. The war would come again, the enemies would not stop, but Reed no longer feared it, because beside him stood a girl who had chosen hope, a girl who had chosen life, and together they would face whatever came next.